Howdy. I have a story for you today. An anecdote of sorts, though describing it as such feels improper. You'll get why. So as you probably are aware, I'm British, I live in the UK. I'm also an aging old fart and haven't been to school in many, many years. Though there is one event that happened to me at secondary school that always stuck with me. And for my American friends, secondary school is, I think, equivalent to your high school. It's school years 7 to 11. Now, like most places, our school days start at 9. We have a 15-minute registration with our form tutor, who clocks us into the school for our attendance every morning. This was also the first Tuesday of the new school year. We'd recently come back from summer holidays. We got through the first lesson fine. I had maths, if I recall, and that ended at about 10:15. And then we moved on to the second class, which was IT, Information Technology, which back in those days was called ITC, Information Technology and Communications. Our IT class was set up in a bungalow outside of the premises of the main building. That's how long ago this was. PCs weren't really a mainstay. All of the PCs of the school was essentially in an outhouse. That class had barely started. The lesson itself had barely begun when the school felt the need to run a fire drill. Necessary, I'm sure. My thought process at the time was something along the lines of making sure the new Year 7s understood the evacuation procedure. Or so I thought. Our school had 3 parking lots, each assigned to different year groups as muster points. Mine was the one behind the cafeteria kitchen. I assumed it was routine, stand in the cold for 10 minutes, get our names called, then shuffle back to class, as is the usual. But 10 minutes passed, then 15, then 20, then 25. Eventually, our form tutor turns up and tells us we are to remain where we are. One of our classmates pipes up at this point and asks, "Wait, is there actually a fire?" Our form tutor replies, "No," and then shuffles off back to wherever she came from. Huh? An hour goes by. No smoke, no fire, and yet we are still outside. But at this point, the police have arrived. With sniffer dogs. At least I assume they were sniffer dogs. The police arrived with dogs. Now, kids being kids, we were mostly fine with the unexpected time off lessons. You know, we joked around, played some games, stayed fairly unfazed. But that didn't really last, as our tutor returned, again, and instructed us to move to the sports field. The town of my secondary school is very, very hilly. There's a lot of tight roads, old houses, so the sports field itself sat on a slope, which always made playing football very interesting. But now we were told to gather at the very bottom, as far from the school buildings as possible. When someone asked why, the answer was very blunt. In case there's an explosion, that is the furthest point from any blast or debris. Verbatim. Someone had called into the school and reported a bomb had been planted. We stayed outside for hours. It was around 1 p.m. UK time before students began heading home. And if you're wondering why so many stayed that long, most parents were working, and many students relied on the school bus to get home, which only turned up once in the afternoon. Eventually, we were told to find a way home and leave the premises entirely. This was also a time when kids didn't have mobile phones. I had no way to contact home, and finding a way to contact anyone took some time by itself. Luckily, my older sister, who attended the school at the same time, had a friend with a phone, who was passing it around for other people to call, and we managed to call our mother. When our mother arrived, she was beside herself. Understandably. But perhaps not for the reason you're expecting. The drive home was quiet. It was tense, but it was quiet. and when we got home, the house was silent, except for the TV that was playing in the lounge. The news was on. The World Trade Center was on fire. Today is September 11th, 2001. It wasn't long after that the South Tower collapsed. I spent the rest of the afternoon watching that disaster unfold. This year marks the 25th anniversary of that attack. I don't want to steal any of the limelight from that, nor do I want any stolen valor. What happened to me at school that day, while strange and unsettling, doesn't compare to the horror experienced in the US. I'm simply telling you the story of my day. However, the timeline from my perspective is still surreal. As I said, I'm in the UK. American Airlines Flight 11 hit the North Tower at 1:46 p.m. our time, 8:46 a.m. in New York. My sister called my mother about the bomb scare at school maybe 10 or 15 minutes after that happened. I can't imagine the panic many parents must have felt as we were all sent home at the worst possible moment. The bomb scare itself, called in around at 10:30 UK time, would have been about 5:30 in the morning in the US. Whoever phoned in that threat did so before anything happened in New York. I do not believe the two events are connected. That would be absurd. I know some people say there's no such thing as a coincidence, and I'm often one of them, but in this case I genuinely think it was just that, a coincidence. There's no reason an ordinary secondary school in England, tucked away in a quiet town, would be of any kind of threat or target in that attack. What is frustrating is that local news never reported on this. They had far bigger stories to cover, obviously. I've spent 25 years trying to find a mention of it, a clipping, an article, but nothing. The only proof is the memories of those who were there. And aside from my mother and my sister, I don't really keep in contact with anyone from my school. I never knew if the bomb threat was real or not. I assumed not, and was simply an ill-timed prank. But curiously, none of our tutors ever allowed us to quiz them on it. So, who knows? 25 years on, it's still an awful thing to think about. And being one of the few kids who was sent home early that day here in the UK, I watched the tragedy unfold live. And like I said, it still feels surreal. I hope my American friends have found some measure of peace, though I know many will still mourn. I will be watching the memorial services, and though I'm not usually one for it, I will be praying with you. I still think about how that day unfolded. How something small and local brushed up against something vast and world-changing. It is a memory that always grounds me. It reminds me how fragile and connected our lives really are. Yeah. Thank you for listening to my story. I wish you all the best. I love you all. Good night.